Welcome everyone. Dan, are you set up to sing the International?
I can do.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. So if we could, I could welcome you all here. We're obviously here to celebrate the 200th anniversary of, what was it again?
Karl Marx.
The 200th anniversary of the birth of Karl Marx. It's a auspicious occasion for us. We want to celebrate the ongoing relevance of Karl Marx's teachings to the workers of all country. I think before we begin, I'm just going to welcome our special guest. So, Comrade Julio Pugot from the Cuban Embassy. If you please come up to the front and give him a warm round of applause. I'll ask you to come back. You're going to speak first. I'll tell you what, if I get you to sit here.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
That's fantastic. And Comrade Marcos Garcia, First Secretary of the Venezuelan Embassy, the old friend as well. Thank you so much for coming, Comrade. If you grab the end chair, and I'll take this one. Wonderful. So we also have speakers from the party. We're going to have Comrade Deborah Lavin, who's as you know, a well-known socialist historian, and will speak to us a little bit about Marx's life and, of course, his legendary relationship with his co-founder of scientific socialism, Friedrich Engels. I'm not going to demand that she come up to the platform right now, but if you could give her a round of applause. We're going to have Comrade Joti Brar, who is a member of our Central Committee, founder member of our party. She's, I'm sure, one of the future leaders of our party, and she's going to give us an update on the situation in Syria, so if you can give her a hand as well. And our true leader, sitting right at the back on the sound recording equipment, is Comrade Dan, who is going to be giving our main speech today. Comrade Harpal sends his greetings to the meeting. He dearly wishes he could have been with us tonight. It was his firm intention to give the main speech tonight. Unfortunately, he had a further operation, so now his fourth spinal operation. Luckily, he's recovering well, so that is good news, and he will be back with us. He's coming back on the 10th. But he sends his greetings to the meeting and his wishes for a successful meeting. So thank you very much. But Comrade... Comrade Dan has happily stepped into the breach, and he'll be giving our main meeting on Marx and the ongoing relevance of his teachings to workers today in Britain and, of course, across the world. I'd like to begin, before we kick off with all of that programme, with a rendition of the International. We'll just sing the first verse. Hopefully all of you know it. We've not put out the words, but if I could ask you, comrades, to stand. And Dan, when he has the music, do you want to give us the first note so we get the note down? How's it going to sound? From the beginning, just... Okay. So that's what it will sound like. Doing it. Thank you very much. Give yourself a hand round of applause. So, Comrade Julio from the Cuban Embassy unfortunately does have to leave us very shortly. It's a great pleasure to have a representative from one of the remaining socialist countries under whose leadership of the Cuban revolutionaries and the Cuban communists, formerly of Fidel Castro, now Raul Castro, and I'm sure we're going to hear about the new president of Cuba, which is relatively unknown, and the first president and the first leader of the country to be born after the Cuban Revolution came about, if only a few days. And not to be one of the generation who took part in the actual revolution itself. So it's a very important and a transition, but important for the continuity and ongoing success and vitality of the Cuban Revolution. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over directly to Comrade Julio, who I'm sure will update us on the situation in Cuba. Thank you.
Dear comrades, first of all, I want to thank you for always counting on Cuba. For us, it's an honor to accompany you in the celebration of the 200th anniversary of Marx's birth. I have come to offer you our revolutionary greeting and respect and admiration for your eternal struggle to keep the thought and work of this great man in the history of humanity forever alive. The Cuban Revolution, that has hoisted the flags of socialism since its early years, will continue to be defended all times, because we believe it is the most just, supportive, and humanistic system for all. In Cuba, we declared socialism irrevocable, and we have, instead of defending and perfecting it, despite the siren song that summoned to us forget history and abandon the struggle. In the Cuban Revolution, it was very important, essential indeed, linked to Marxism with the best revolutionary tradition of Latin America, in particular, the thought of José Martí. Today, in the current circumstances, it is equally important to take into account the support that can be obtained from the experience of revolutionary Cuba. Although some deny it, Marxism is humanism, a humanism based on the revolutionary potential of a human being to transform history. Our Commander-in-Chief, Fidel Castro, said, Marx's theory was never a fixed scheme. It was a conception, it was a method, it was an interpretation, it was a science in the real sense of it was concrete, derived from specific realities, and there are no two concrete cases exactly the same. As everyone knows, and I had this opportunity to thank the congratulatory message received, last week on April 19, coinciding with the date of Girón victory, the electoral process concluded in Cuba with the election of Comrade Miguel Díaz Canel Bermúdez as President of Council of State and Minister, who, in his inaugural address, assured that this new generation will guarantee the continuity of our socialist revolution by the humble and for the humbles. Always keeping in mind the legacy of Fidel Castro as a permanent leader and the presence of Army General Raul Castro, who will continue as first secretary of our Communist Party, guaranteeing the unity of the nation and his people, and who will lead the most important decision for the present and the future of the country. We must stand firm and unite to face the constant aggression of Yankee imperialists against our revolution, that they have always been determined to destroy, because they cannot bear the idea that we have built a socialist revolution only 90 miles away from their territory. Donald Trump has entrenched the blockade against Cuba, which is the biggest obstacle for the economic development of our country. He has decreed this as his main weapon to destroy the revolution. The blockade is a genocidal act and has extraterritorial effects. The whole world opposes it every year and the United Nations. However, Trump is determined to apply the same foul measures to 11 of his predecessors who have never been able to break us. They won't defeat us. With the blockade or without blockade, our revolution will continue to stand firm and victorious with the unity of all our people. In spite of everything, we will continue forward. We will continue to offer our solidarity and international help to all countries. Our doctors continue to work in the most remote corners of the planet where no one wants to go. We reiterate our full support to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and his president, Nicolás Maduro, as well as all the people of Latin America who are suffering the ravage of our fascist right, determined to destroy everything we have achieved in recent years in the region. We thank all of our friends for their solidarity and support with our people, and we assure them that we will not fail them. Cuba will continue working of strengthening our prosperous and sustainable socialism. Thank you very much.
Viva Cuba! Cuba, sí! Yankees, no. Can you hear me? Can you hear me then? Thank you so much, Comrade Julio. Comrade, thank you so much for coming. Are you able to stay for any time at all, or you need to go? You need to go. So, Comrade, thank you so much for coming. Please extend our greetings to Comrade Teresita and everyone at the Cuban Embassy. Please extend our greetings through the embassy, to your government, to your people, and we wish you every success, and we have the greatest confidence that this transition to a new generation and to President Bermúdez will be a period of great continuity and continued strength and vitality for Cuban people and the Cuban Revolution. So thank you for coming. So, comrades, we're going to move on, and I'm going to keep our comrade from Venezuela a little bit, so you have to wait for his contribution to make sure no one leaves the meeting early. I would like to move on, and we'll probably have the main speech relatively soon. Dan, are you prepared to give your speech? I'm going to ask Dan to come and give his principal contribution on the teachings of Marx. The CPGB-ML, as you know, is a growing and a vibrant political force in our country. We place quite a large emphasis on study, on theory, and we believe that there's a reason for this. That theory, that people's understanding plays the most revolutionary part. Even to get up and do relatively mundane tasks, we find those who constantly present themselves for action are those who are most theoretically geared up, those who understand the system, those who understand why it's necessary to fight. And Karl Marx's ideas are an ongoing inspiration to all of us in that struggle. Recently in my study group in South London, and we have study groups all over the country, and for those who are watching at home or those who are here in the audience today, I invite you to get good on our website, go and see where your local branch is, marry yourselves up with them, go along, find out what they're up to, and get involved and learn, because still the relevance of Marxism and its revolutionary ideology is truly electrifying and has the ability, when combined with our practice, to bring about great and powerful changes in favor of the working people of our country today. That was a pause for applause. But fair enough. When we even if I have to drag it from you. Lenin found it necessary on the eve of the Russian Revolution and during the midst of the great inter-imperialist war, when the greatest imperialist states were really knocking 7 shades out of each other, were sacrificing tens of millions of workers' lives in their attempt to redivide the globe, in their attempt to conquer the greatest territories, exploit the greatest amount of mineral resources, have the greatest number of slaves and of colonies and possessions. He found it necessary to revisit Marx's teaching on the state and to explain what the revolutionary essence of them was. It's generally agreed that Marx had a profound effect on the thinking of humanity. BBC polls at the turn of the century pronounced Marx to be the most influential person in the world's history, actually, and that's in an imperialist country like Britain. In 2008, when the crisis hit, suddenly, whereas before, when the Soviet Union collapsed, we were met with a spectre of Chancellor Kohl holding up a copy of Lenin's Imperialism and Marx's Capital and throwing them away. When we were confronted with the spectre of Francis Fukuyama, US Reagan-sponsored ideologue, telling us it was the end of history. History ended with capitalism. There was no higher form of society or state than that which embodied the exploitation of man by man and nation by nation. That was the triumphalism of the bourgeois ideologues at the fall of the Soviet Union. But you know, when the crisis hit in a redoubled way in 2008, when it really struck home, when banks were collapsing, when the stock markets were plunging, when the housing market was slumping, when working people were being laid off, when there were gluts of goods being shown in factories, when the working people were too impoverished to buy them, they changed their tune, and it became fashionable once again to briefly and glibly revisit Marxism and explain, you know, there was something in this. Marx showed something about the working of the market, something about the inherent nature of the capitalist market to meet crises and meet problems. And we're going through that period now. But the BBC very cleverly were the ones who wanted to take the lead in that dialogue. And they actually put on a series of programs. I think it was Emily Maitland who actually produced them, a well-known kind of financial analyst and thinker, one of those Newsnight presenters.
His preachings are so incendiary, he's been forced out of his native country. Only liberal Britain will tolerate his presence on her soil. He heads to London to live in exile. The year is 1849. But today, that man's writings are still dangerous. They're so radical, so revolutionary, they continue to divide the world. It's been more than 150 years since he started writing about the world. But you know what? If you're looking for an explanation of the global economic crisis, he's a surprisingly good place to start. With everything going so wrong, you have to wonder, is Karl Marx turning out to be right? Most people know Marx as the father of communism. You might be surprised to hear that most of what he wrote was about capitalism. And today, his ideas about that are being taken seriously right at the heart of global business.
His analysis was pretty on the button and explains a lot, I think, about some of the things that we see going on around in our economy today.
For Marx, the best argument against capitalism was that it was inherently unfair. His ideas on inequality have more resonance than ever today. Today, the stakes could hardly be higher.
All three of these men were giants whose ideas live on. But they speak to us right now because they, more than anyone, recognise the double-edged power of money, how markets could transform all of our lives, but also plunge us into chaos. Keynes and Hayek argued about whether government should try to tame this force of human nature, capitalism. Karl Marx had the most radical advice of all: get rid of it.
But he said, of course, the trouble with Marx is he didn't present any alternative vision of the future. Didn't have any idea about what would come next. One only has to open the pages of the Communist Manifesto to see that this is not true. Marx not only described class struggle, he not only described the problems of capitalism, but he described very clearly that capitalism sowed within itself, had within itself the seeds of its own destruction. That the working men were the grave diggers of capitalism, and the working men were capable of building a new society in which we ended exploitation of one nation by another and one person by another. I'm not going to give your speech then. I know that I'm not touching on anything you're saying because I've heard your speech. And I'm going to simply say that Lenin found it necessary to revisit the fundamental teachings on the state and revolution at the time of the First World War, precisely because the entire socialist, social democratic camp had deserted the revolutionary teaching of Marxism. He said, it's often the case with bourgeois thinkers. Ah, my family are coming. It's often the case with bourgeois thinkers, with great revolutionary thinkers, that during the time of their life, when they're involved in a revolutionary struggle, when they're putting forward revolutionary ideas, when they're a threat to the established order and established interests, that they are greeted with derision, that they have abuse heaped upon them, that scorn is there, countless attempts are made by the establishment to discredit their ideas. But after their death, they live again. They're born in a sanctified, beatified way. But their revolutionary essence of their teaching is discarded. And it was quite okay to consider yourself a Marxist, a social democrat, which was the forerunner of the communists, even during the First World War, as long as you discarded the revolutionary teaching of Marx on the state, that it was necessary for the working people not only to come to power within the bourgeois state and trying to use that power, but to smash the capitalist state and build a new state, a new apparatus of power that represented the interests of working people, to actually put the working people in power to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. That was the fundamental essence of the revolutionary teaching of Marx. It was the fundamental essence which the bourgeoisie were very keen to do away with. I'm going to ask Dan to come and speak to you now. He's got a lovely speech prepared on the ongoing relevance of Marx's ideology for us today. So please put your hands together for Comrade Dan.